Review copy provided by PlayStation.
Howdy, Brandon Jones here. Got Brad Ellis with me, and we have both finished Spider-Man Miles Morales. And I know what you're thinking. Hasn't everybody at Easy Allies finished Miles Morales? Look, Hubert just finished his playthrough of Valhalla at 96 hours. Everybody's, Yakuza Like a Dragon's a big game. Everybody's finishing other stuff. I am grateful that Brad took the time, with the PS5 being in his house, to check out Miles Morales and is here with me to talk about the story. And we are about to do that right now. But if you haven't played Miles Morales, you have to play it first because there's some really good story moments that I don't want to have spoiled for you. But we're going to get into it. Spoilers start right now.
Spoiler mode, final warning, spoiler mode activated.
Okay, story time. Before we get into the actual story of Miles Morales. In the original next-gen plans of Easy Allies, Brad was going to review Demon's Souls way in advance.
Correct.
Which is why the PS5 was shipped to your house.
Mm-hmm.
And then you crack it open, we find out, actually, you can't play Demon's Souls until launch. And so Brad says, well, I guess I'll check out Miles Morales. And then here I am working on all these other things, and I'm like, I gotta beat Miles Morales in a day. And I get the message from, which you would think would be a very nice gesture, but just burnt me to the core. Where Brad says, hey, I finished Miles Morales if you want to talk about it later. And I'm like, well, that's great, Brad. That's wonderful.
I definitely lucked out.
How luxurious must be nice. So you got to finish Miles Morales before any of us.
True, yeah. It was the only game we had at the time, so I was like, oh, I might as well play it.
Where were you at emotionally when you finished this game?
Emotionally?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it affected people more than me. Like, I wasn't, like, super emotional playing this game. There's parts I really, like, I could relate to, I guess. I wasn't, like, I don't want to sound, like, mean or anything like that.
Sure.
It's just, like, I don't know. It didn't maybe affect me as much as everyone else that I've seen.
I'll bring the sap to the spoiler
fascinating.
mode.
Yeah, totally.
You don't need to be responsible for that. We need a more level-headed approach. I think maybe why I got emotional was I was not expecting this to be emotional. I was not expecting to see it steered in different directions, following Spider-Verse, which I've seen like 8 times. I wasn't expecting.
I haven't seen that, Jones, so that might be a big part of it.
Uh-oh.
I know. I haven't seen it, so that could be a big reason why.
Well, that's also a big wrench thrown into the spoiler mode, bro.
Sorry, bro. But you could spoil it for me. Don't worry about it. I assume there's going to be many things.
I won't spoil it for you. Well, Miles Morales spoiled some things already for you. And that's actually, I mean, hey, as long as we're talking about it, let's start there.
Do not worry about it.
Aaron Davis is Miles' uncle, and he is also the Prowler. And both of those characters are in Miles Morales, Spider-Verse. And so going into this, when I first saw Aaron, I was like, oh, it's the Prowler. And I was like, I don't remember him working, at working the railways, oh, maybe they're not going to get into that. And then he reveals, no, I know you're Spider-Man. Obviously, I know my nephew. I recognize your voice. I know your build. I can if I see you moving, it doesn't matter what you're wearing. I know it's you. And I think the game did a great job of kind of subverting expectations because it kind of goes down the same road. They fight. There's the turmoil, obviously, between his father, who is still alive in Spider-Verse. But what did you think just kind of that relationship, which actually when I was reviewing it, I didn't finish all of I didn't do the mission after the credits, where he goes around the hunt around the city where they brought back his dad's voice actor, to do little bits.
Yeah, that was actually a really cool part. I did like his uncle. I really liked it. As an uncle myself, I was like, maybe that's a part I could kind of relate to,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I'd want to be close with my nephew and niece in the future, but I don't want to be that relationship with them. But yeah, I mean, I liked his uncle. I thought he was cool. I was with the beginning where he's like, Miles, I recognized you. And that camera, I was like, oh, really? You recognize? He's like, those are the same moves that you did on the court with your dad. I was like, oh, yeah, he was doing fucking backflips and stuff with your dad on the court. I don't buy that. But it's still fun. The voice, I totally buy.
Well, it's a thing in comic books where, Clark Kent puts on, takes his glasses off, and all of a sudden he's a completely different person. So I kind of like that it cuts through that.
Sure.
And
they don't dance around it, which I liked. They just got to it.
That is primarily what is different about Spider-Verse. They dance a lot, and it's a beautiful story. It's just a different way to tell the story. And so it's not a better than, worse than situation. I just liked that these writers. I'm curious where they were at, if they had seen Spider-Verse and then, wrote the script from scratch, or if these were ideas that they were already building up because they clearly were like, let's get the cat out of the bag immediately. Let's have him know that he's Spider-Man very, very early. Let's have, Miles know that he's the Prowler very early, and let's have them work together. And that's actually, from a gameplay standpoint, something that I really liked about the game were these co-op missions compared to Spider-Man. That, you got to go with Finn on a mission and fight with her. You got to have not only a fight with your uncle, but a fight alongside your uncle where you were fighting people. And the second time I played it, I just kind of perched and just watched the Prowler go around and smack dudes. So I wonder if we're going to see more of that in Spider-Man 2. If we're going to see more.
Dude, Jones, I want Spider-Man fighting with Venom side by side. That's what I want.
And we can, bouncing around the story, but we can just jump straight to the end. The end, the post-classic Marvel post-credits. Where do you think they're going with that, just in terms of, Venom with Norman?
I thought that was Harry Osborn, in the tank.
It's Harry, but he's got some, symbiote craziness.
So is he not going to be the Hobgoblin then? Is he going to be Venom?
I don't know. I think Hobgoblin's a different boy. I gotta, check myself for this.
I'm not a Spider-Man expert at all. So
I think Harry's just Green Goblin too. I think his dad was the first Green Goblin, and then he also becomes the Green Goblin, and then Hobgoblin is a different.
Apologies, Spider-Man fans.
Well,
we know Batman.
True, and I got my Marvel shirt on. I know as much as the MCU and the scattered comics that I did read back in the day. One big break that I think is interesting from the comics is Finn is Phineas Mason, a very old Vulture type dude in the comics. Finn is not directly associated with Miles Morales, or Phineas rather, the Tinkerer. I was surprised when I saw that on the wiki. I was like, wow, that is a major departure for them, not only to say, here's a character that people don't necessarily directly associate, that existed before Miles Morales was created. Let's bring Tinker into this game. Let's change Tinker's age, gender, backstory. Let's tie them in. What did you think of Finn overall?
They did the whole thing of trying to make the character more relatable to Miles, which I think is it's fine. I would be okay if it was either way, but it doesn't really bother me that much. Comic book stuff changes all the time.
Oh, I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you think of just their hero-villain relationship? It was exposed very early in a scene that I love some doctored trailer footage. We saw that shot in the trailer, but her mask didn't come off in the trailer originally.
I like their relationship as when they were civilians and stuff like that, when they were actually just talking to each other. The whole reveal thing, I guess. It was okay. I don't know. Nothing gut punched me in this game, and I'm definitely the minority in this kind of category, but I just thought it was alright. I'm interested to hear you tell me why you really liked it.
I talk way too much on spoiler modes, so I'm trying to dial it back as much as I can.
I'm asking for you to explain stuff.
Brad, to be honest, I was kind of bummed initially. When the mask came down and it was her, I was like, oh, well, that's simple. That.
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, I wasn't surprised at all.
Yeah, because I was like, I don't know Tinkerer. I don't know a lot of Spider-Man villains, and even villains like Vulture and stuff. I only know from video games. From my watching the cartoon a little bit, and reading a Spider-Man comic here or there. I think Carnage is the biggest villain that I know that really does not get a lot of treatment in games. So I'm very, very excited, especially for the next Venom movie. So I was bummed that another character wasn't going to be introduced, that we weren't going to then dive. I was like, okay, we got Simon Krieger. He's interesting. We got Underground, curious about them.
Oh, Simon Krieger.
And this kind of, I don't know, just it seems not an oversimplification, but it was like, oh, it's just her. Okay. I know her. And then it really wasn't until, obviously later when we get into, her brother and, what happened to him, how that's obviously mirrored in the end when she sees Miles go off and try to, suck the energy out of the reactor. And she's like, not again. I can't let this happen again, to the people that I love. And I guess the only other thing that I thought was bad was just kind of the classic Romeo and Juliet ruse of the messengers passing on the road and you're like, no, it's it's so close to not going wrong. And there were just so many moments where Miles was like, I gotta tell you something, and she's like, no, and runs away. And you're like, damn it, if you could
just listen, dude.
If you could just have a 5-minute conversation,
you guys could sort this out,
lives could be saved. But But that kind of is classic Spider-Man. Is just this, kids with way too much responsibility,
Right.
with given way too much power. And I enjoyed the science aspect of it. I love how Spider-Man, and especially the way that they approached Miles and Finn, is like, yay, smart people. It's like, yay, that they have this drive, that they, it. And that's the other thing, too, that I thought was kind of, a little bit silly. It was like, of course, Miles gets bit. Of course, she becomes the Tinkerer. Of course, these two best friends are now caught in this crazy situation because that also happens to Peter and Harry.
Right.
So it was a little bit, kind of like repeating things. But I enjoyed that we got an origin story with Miles that we didn't get with Peter. I enjoyed that we didn't get it with Peter. I like that we jumped past that. It was like Uncle Ben. Just enough. We've seen that so many times.
We don't. Yeah.
And so I like that Insomniac kind of got to be like, okay, well, with Miles, though, now we can recapture that energy. Now we can have him being like, how do you do this? How do you manage this?
Yeah, he's a rookie.
There's a great line at the beginning where he's like, man, I don't know how Peter, he's on the phone with his mom, like, hi, Mom. Run to the market and get that thing, like, as he's, swinging. The audio design, I love that, and this was also true in, 2 years ago in Spider-Man, where if you are web swinging and he talks, they'll be out of breath. But if you stop before a new line of dialogue starts, they will, they recorded two different versions of every line. And so there's one moment where Miles's mom, Rio, called me, and I was like, oh, hey, Mom. And she's like, are you okay? Like, you sound kind of out of breath. And I, like, stopped. And was like, all right. And, like, landed on a rooftop. And then was like, no, it's fine. I was just at the gym or whatever. So I'm like, that's a good story. That's a good script if you're kind of forcing me to change the way I'm actively playing to kind of fit with, with what Miles is doing. What did you think of Miles, just as a protagonist, just kind of his life and the tug of war between him and Spider-Man?
This is like my first introduction, I guess, to Miles, since I haven't really seen a movie, so I didn't really know him. I mean, I knew of him because of the last game and stuff like that, but I liked him. He was just a likable high school kid trying to do the right thing. I like that he like messed up a lot as Spider-Man and always was worrying about that. I think that was a cool touch, because he looks up to Peter, but he's still just like, he's still like a dumb high school kid, but he does have way too much responsibility on his shoulders.
What'd you think of the new Peter?
It like weirded me out for a minute, then I just didn't care. I was like, whatever.
The thing that
I haven't played the other Spider-Man in like 2 years, so it's not as bad for me.
The thing that bummed me out about the new Peter is the Insomniac Peter is actually a little bit different. He, than your traditional, a lot of the Peter Parkers that I've seen. And just style wise, he just, the facial features, hair, the build, he just was unique. And this new Peter's like, oh yeah, that's kind of more
much younger looking.
Yeah,
almost.
That's kind of more Peter Parker. I mean, just his,
Sure.
just in general, like his style and appearance. Where like this new Peter kind of fits more into like, that's a
good point,
that's Tom
Jones.
Holland.
Yeah, that's true.
That's kind of
true.
more
Yeah.
the spike.
Good point.
The Andrew Garfield spiky hair. But it was interesting. There was a moment that I felt both times that I played through the game, because I played it on our group account for the review, and then was able to put a lot more time into it. Did all of the app calls and all of the crimes and all the bases and stuff like that. I don't know if I'll go for platinum, but it was an interesting moment at the end when Spider-Man comes back, when he finally finishes, saves the day, gives high fives everybody on the street, and then, oh yeah, there's quote unquote Spider-Man. I got used to Miles, I definitely, it was interesting seeing the two of them, together. What did you think of just kind of Peter's role in the story, being gone on vacation, coming back now, how that sets up,
I think
a sequel?
that was the best way you could handle it, because you can't have Peter in the city while this is going down. This has to be Miles' story, his time to shine kind of event. And if Peter was there, it would, like, I really love the beginning when Peter is there, and I like that he's kind of mentoring Miles, but this needed to be Miles' moment to grow and stand on his own. So I'm happy that he was gone and he called in every once in a while, which I really appreciated. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how else you're going to handle Peter getting out of the city.
Yeah. I was bummed we didn't hear from Mary Jane at all.
Right. I mean, I don't know if she knows Miles, like, really that well.
Yeah. It was that was
she
just a
call
very,
him? I don't know.
That was they saved a buck on that for sure. They were like, we don't need
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Should I call her? Like, no. But there's a lot of really great. It's one thing that I love when open world games do, and the original Spider-Man did this as well. Which is even after the game is over, there's a lot of really great after credits roll. If you're just cruising around the city, there's a ton of phone calls. Genki does more stuff,
much,
Rio
yeah.
does more stuff, and he talks to Peter a lot. There was one moment where there's an achievement where you can go and check in on your dad's grave, and I could probably just Google to find out where it was, but I was like, there's a graveyard in Harlem, maybe it's there. And I'm just saying, these poor people are grieving in the graveyard, and Spider-Man's just like
Walking around, yeah.
excuse me. What's the name on that one? There's a name on almost every grave. It's cool. But while I was doing that, they had some context because, Peter calls right away and says, "Oh my God, I saw that the bridge blew up. I can be on the next plane. I'll be there tomorrow." And I was like, "I got it. Please, do your job. I got it." And they also set up that context because even after he comes back, and I was running around picking up some of the extra items and cases and stuff, I was like, "Oh yeah, we're Spider-Man now. Like he's back in the city." And they do kind of cover that with him being like, "I got to get a job. Like I really don't really have time to be Spider-Man right now." And I get a sense that's kind of the ebb and flow of being Spider-Man, is that like you're either on the job or not. Like you're either
pretty much.
you either have a moment to take a breather.
It's not Batman. He needs money.
I think they established it's a year later, so it's just like, oof, even that's just enough time to set up the story, but also like, man, imagine living in New York, going through all of that stuff that happens in Spider-Man, and then all you do is get a year off, and then like Harlem's almost like ripped off the map. So yeah, you were saying you have vague memories of Spider-Man, even just from a couple years ago. What did it feel like coming back to New York, just in terms of being focused on Harlem, it being winter? Just the map.
When I played Jones and I hopped in, I immediately thought of you saying, like, how could they keep New York interesting and like keeping it feeling fresh? And I'm like, well, I love the Yakuza games, and you go to Kamurocho like in every single game, and I still enjoy it. But I think just the minor tweak of it being like Christmas time in the city really helps change it a lot. The last game was like summer or spring, real sunny, but this time it's snowing, there's snow blizzards going on, so it felt like it didn't feel like I was treading old ground, even though you were, but it just had enough window dressing where it felt still kind of new to me.
I wonder if people who live in New York are like bummed when like, because they actually commented in the story that Roxxon just kind of like plonk, this big building just crushed all of these things that used to be there. I'm actually curious to go back. There's so many games to play. Every time I get tempted to play Spider-Man, it's like, what am I doing? I don't have time to go back and put another 20, 30 hours into this game that I've already beaten. I even did do New Game Plus because I was like, I gotta focus on other stuff. But I'm curious what was there. I'm curious to go back in Spider-Man Remastered to that Roxxon Plaza and see what they took out. Another thing I'm curious of that I don't know if they were added for Miles Morales was I felt that there was a lot more. Obviously, there's a lot of really great representation in the story, which I want to get into. But I felt that reflected in the city, not only obviously in the people that live there, in the fair scene, which is great, where he's going through Spanish Harlem, and you see all the different flags and you hear different languages, and but there was a lot of great street art. There were a lot of fun faces that I saw with names, and I'd be like, who is that? And just a lot of interesting historical figures. And I wonder if that stuff was added, if they changed up the spray paint in Harlem to kind of more reflect, this diverse community that they were trying to represent.
Yeah, I don't know.
But just, before I start like spouting off examples, what did you just in general think of this community? Just this vibe of, the last line in the game is, that's our Spider-Man, and that's actually kind of part of why I got emotional. It's like, I love that
did
message.
like it because he was like Harlem Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And a lot of the quests, like the phone app quests, were like relating to stuff about in his like actual neighborhood. Like a community neighborhood Spider-Man, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Like he literally is this time, not just the whole cities, which I did like. And like kind of at the end where the citizens are kind of protecting him, his identity. I did like that, but also at the same time, I was like, man, a lot of people know who you are now. Like, yeah, a lot of people know who you are now.
I don't know if I got far enough in the campaign when I reviewed it to get to the point where Genki goes on the Danica cast, but it's like, Genki, what are you doing?
Yeah.
He's
like
like,
everyone
"Hey,
in the city knows who you are.
shout out to everybody that helped us. This person, this person, this person. It's like, Genki, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
that's
And it's like, one point I think it's dumb, but at the second point, I think about high school kids
sure.
and how they probably couldn't help themselves.
And that, I mean, we could. It's a cozy transition to talk about Genki. It definitely did feel. Peter talks to a lot of people in the original game. You obviously got Mary Jane. You have the policewoman whose name I completely forget. But really,
Spider Cop thing. I totally forgot about
Spider
that.
Cop.
Yeah.
And even just hearing the voice of Harry Osborn, you don't actually get to see Harry Osborn, but it was fun having. One of my favorite Genki lines is he's like, "Hey, I'm trying to shut down this thing. Can you? Oh, we've reopened Feast. Can you call the city and let them know? Give them an anonymous phone call." And Genki's like, "All right, one high school kid pretending to be an adult phone call coming up."
Yeah.
So it was neat to see, kind of Genki back at home base.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Genki.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a jolly good best friend, He had his back.
Do you think he hacked a little too fast?
Yes.
There was sometimes
Yes, I do.
Miles
Yes,
didn't even finish the sentence. He's like, "Hey, can you set this up for me?" He's like, "Done."
Yeah, he is like in the Matrix, like hacking.
I have a super nitpicky note for Insomniac. If anyone on the team happens to be listening to this, that I didn't think of at all when I was originally playing the game. It was only on my second playthrough. Almost every time, either Finn or Genki or I think they do it sometimes with Genki, which is nice, but specifically Miles, whenever he goes over to a computer and types on the keyboard, nothing happens on the screen. Like there's no, I was like, what is he typing? Like, where's this text? Super,
I have a
super
nitpick too,
nitpicky
Jones.
on-
We talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
Too many phone calls, man. Like, I felt like way too interrupted all the time. Jones, I remember I got like 2 pickup shots for you. You're like, just give me a shot of the city kind of thing like that. And I was like, okay.
Graphics and stuff.
And
yeah.
I would do it, and someone would call me, and I was like, God damn it. And I'd wait. Then I'd do it again, and someone else would call me. I was like, God, come on, man.
I actually was in conflict with that when I first booted up Spider-Man 2 years ago because I was like, oh, it's not a natural time of day flow. That's a bummer. But it makes sense, and I actually kind of dig it, the way that time of day passes in Spider-Man, because they're very controlling of it. They're like, no, this happens at night. That is this mission. And I actually just played something yesterday where I did a mission in Assassin's Creed Valhalla during the day where Hubert did it at night, and it was a little weird that Hubert's having this conversation with this dude at like 2 a.m. It's like, well, wouldn't they be asleep? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like that they set that. But there is this strange kind of like poking from the campaign where it's like, go do some phone calls now. And you're like, well, I want to do the campaign. Like, nah, campaign's paused. And you're like, all right. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, then I'll go off because I have no problem doing that in open world games where it's like, cool, I'll spend 2 hours just doing random stuff. You do one, and then the story picks up, and he'll say like, all right, I got to go talk to Finn. And it's like, well, I'm doing phone calls, So I wonder if Spider-Man 2 would be a fun option if you just turn the phone off. If you're just like, no, stop. Like I don't
just ignore calls.
Pause the story. Like I'm just gonna run around town. Because I actually kind of dig. I think it's somewhat of an elegant solution to this issue of you. It's kind of like the radio stations in Grand Theft Auto, where it's like you just do a lot of driving in those games. How do we entertain you while you're driving? And so it's like you're just gonna be webbing around town a lot. Thank goodness the fast travel on PS5 is like super fast, but there were a lot of instances just lore wise where I'm like, I want to web over there. Do you at least agree that that's an interesting way to add context to kind of fit the story into these moments where the game just doesn't want to watch you have you watching cutscenes all the time.
Yeah, I don't got a problem at all with you doing the storyline, some parts like that through a phone call. I just thought there was too many of them where I was like constantly chatting, dude. I was like, can I just, be Spider-Man, swing around for a little bit?
How's it? I guess he's just got the earbuds in.
Yeah.
What if he gets kicked in the ear?
Yeah.
All these questions that I have. But yeah, I think this game, there was clearly a mission on this team, for the writers and for people coming back into the city to have as much representation as possible. There is obviously with his family and with the Harlem community, there's a lot of representation in the African American community. He also has his Hispanic influence, and so I really liked when he would, he'd like stealth somebody and shh, siesta. I loved when you drop a little Espanol and he knows sign language. which was
Yeah, I was like, wow, this kid is real smart.
yeah.
Is there anything this kid can't do?
I think that definitely endeared me to him, and I think I like that they didn't necessarily provide context for that. He wasn't like, oh wow, I'm glad I took that summer course in sign language. He's
just
like,
knew it, just learned it in school or something. Yeah.
I mean, he's so focused through Peter on through Peter he discovers Feast, and so that's why he's still involved with them. Through his mom, through public service, I imagine that's and his dad's a cop. It just seemed like a kid that like, yeah, you probably at some point took a course or had a friend or something.
I can buy it.
One thing that I thought the game did very well, you were talking about how you have all of these conversations with people on over the phone. I thought the combat dialogue was actually really good, particularly two scenes. You have this big fight with Prowler, which I thought the context was pretty good. It was I actually when I saw how differently they were going to take the Prowler character. They have a lot of fights in Spider-Verse, but neither one of them knows who the other person is, so there's one big chase sequence where like, Aaron doesn't know that Miles is Spider-Man and vice versa. But you do have this fight where Prowler is Aaron's working out of love. He wants to protect his nephew the only way he can, which is a very clumsy way to do that. And, then you obviously have this big fight with Finn, which when I first was playing it, I'm like, didn't I fight Finn already? And it's like, no, I guess that you don't. Like, you don't really have a like full-on confrontation with her at the end. And man, that fight is just bonkers.
Yeah.
She's got like these huge wheels and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I thought they did a really good job of the conversations you have with the enemies while you're fighting. With particularly Prowler. I thought there was just a really great conversation where like, you could really feel like the emotion of Miles being like, I still love you, Aaron, but man, the more I learn about your relationship with my dad, it pisses me off.
I think like the whole thing about his dad and like learning about his past and about him being proud of his dad being a cop, I think that really just adds on to it, and you find out why his mom doesn't want Miles around him and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree with you. I did feel that actually there, Jones.
And you begin Spider-Verse in the exact same place where he kind of has this secret relationship with his uncle. He goes and hangs out with him every now and then, without telling his parents. Interesting note that I picked up from the interwebs, just in doing a little bit of research on these characters. His dad in the comics, Miles's dad, also used to be a criminal. So when they kind of put him on the straight and narrow path in the game where they're like, no, he was always a good guy. Where in the comics, he and his dad were both we're both thieves, and then his dad was like, I can't do this anmiore, and got out of it, and then eventually got into law enforcement. Ends up working for SHIELD, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
After he finds out that that Miles is Spider-Man, he's like, well, I want to try to protect you. We have a new character that I actually didn't even look up. I'm actually curious to see. Let me do this right now in real time. But the Danica cast. So we had J. Jonah Jameson screaming in your ear all through Spider-Man, and then we have an opposite mindset, maybe more in line with the views of Insomniac. What did you think of these like dueling podcasts? This new character, who I'm going to look up now to see if she's actually in the comic books.
Yeah, I thought they were okay. Like how we said earlier, Jones, how I thought there was too many calls. That was definitely a part of it. Like, I wish I could just turn it off. A lot of times I don't even like care to hear any of it. Like Jay like ranting, I'm like, okay, whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, yeah. It's just like, I mean, I don't have strong opinions on either of them, I guess. Sorry, I guess I'm not having these like strong opinions about a lot of this stuff, but a lot of stuff like that didn't really like affect me too much in one way. I was very like neutral about a lot of this stuff, except that there's just too many for me.
First of all, before we get into that, Danica Hart is a YouTube blogger who attends New York University in Manhattan. After the new Spider-Man got his costume damaged in a battle with the Demon who had defeated the Avengers, Danica published a video where she celebrated the fact that new Spider-Man was a kid of color. Miles was shown this video by his friend Genki Lee, but was upset that he didn't want to be known as the Black Spider-Man.
Yeah, he's just Spider-Man too.
And she's got like the purple, highlights in her hair. So yeah, actually very similar. Voiced by our lovely friend, who's in a lot of games now, Ashley Birch. Simon Krieger is also from the comics, which I did not know. So,
is he?
Yeah, he's the head of Roxxon, and Roxxon is also from the comics. So, a lot of fun things that I didn't know.
I thought he was like the weirdest character in this game. Like I feel like he was underutilized, kind of. Like, he was set up to be this big, bad, like, I for sure thought we were going to fight him or something in some weird mech suit or something, And he just got arrested. Like, he, like, barely even interacted with Spider-Man. I think of, like, one scene kind of. Like, obviously, he was behind a lot of the big problems, but I don't know. He felt just kind of weak to me.
He's pretty
know what
one
I mean?
note. I think that might be
Yeah,
it.
he was just like, evil corporate guy.
Not a character you could potentially see coming back in future Spider-Man
No,
games. Just gonna sit in prison for a while. Maybe there'll be like a Raft cameo or something. Like you'll go by his cage and he's like,
Yeah.
grr. They got an extra line from Troy before he left
But,
the
like,
studio.
I don't know. Maybe juggling too many villains at a time could be a problem, especially if they just want to focus on one.
And just what did you think of kind of the underground and Roxxon, just kind of the villains of the game?
Very video gamey. Very video
forces.
game bad guys. Like bright or like purple neon and stuff like that. Like crazy video game gadgets that no one else has. I was like, oh, these are very video game enemies. But they were cool. They were fun to fight, actually. Like playing through this game again, I was like, man, the combat in Spider-Man is super good.
Yeah,
like, man,
very
they
fun.
just nail the feeling of being Spider-Man. Like we said earlier, I haven't played the other one in a while, but I feel like there's a pretty decent amount of variety in combat with enemies where I was like, oh, I gotta do kind of this strategy against this guy. Let me use the Venom thing on this guy, the shield, break his shield and stuff like that. So yeah.
How they changed that up just controller-wise, that was another thing too. When I reached out to you, I was like, what does L1 do? And you're like, oh, it does this.
The gadget,
in the original game. I'm like, got it. It's L1 was the weapon wheel and R1 was to use the weapon. Now,
right.
Now
Shoot it.
R1
Yeah,
does
yeah.
everything in Miles, and then L1 is all of his Venom powers. What you think of the Venom powers? Not necessarily a spoiler conversation, but
No, super fun though. I think that was a nice thing to differentiate him between Peter. Like they were just really fun to use. They looked cool. They were quick, which I really appreciated. They were powerful, but I didn't feel like they were too powerful.
as somebody who talks a lot and I feel is somewhat of an expert on video game difficulty, primarily in the action-adventure genre, what'd you think of Camouflage? Little OP?
Oh yeah, it could be super OP. I think I get it. Like I'm just like, oh man, this kid. Like I'm thinking like the tech of this kid.
Yeah.
Like this kid's like what, 17, 16? Got a cloaking device too. I was like, oh, it's fun though. It's
Yeah.
cool. It's different than Peter, which is nice.
I would flip out if the next game is co-op. If you could do Miles and Peter at the same time, and you could have Miles can camo and Peter can.
I think
throw
building the
gadgets out and
whole game around co-op would be really, really hard to do well. But I
Sure,
think they
maybe-
could do some missions.
stuff. Yeah, just combat trials and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Batman.
But yeah, there's just always that moment where I just get surrounded and like I'll be just ready to do a super ability and then I'll get shocked and I'll lose all of that energy and be like, oh no, and then like my health starts going down. And then like my solution to that in the old Spider-Man game was just like web, just try to get out of there. And now it's like, oh, up on the D-pad, bye.
Yeah.
So that was like, it's like, well, just the skosh of the challenge away. I also liked that J. Jonah Jameson's not actually physically in the first Spider-Man. It's just his voice.
That's true.
And so I like that you saw him. I mean, it was just like a cutscene where he's like
The beginning,
in
right?
in a Santa Claus outfit. But I was like, oh, okay, at least they modeled him.
That's something they should do for the next Spider-Man. Like Peter going in, selling photos or something to him. That's what I want to see, with him laughing like the original one at it.
Somebody recently told me of a storyline that happens in the comics where J. Jonah finds out that Peter's Spider-Man and actually kind of like repents for like all of his, for like being mad at him over the years. But it kind of backfires because then he gets way too into it, and he keeps calling Peter, and he's like, "Hey, I got an idea," and he's like, "Please leave me alone, man." like you know.
That's actually kind of interesting.
I would love to see that because
He becomes like a big Spider-Man fan, yeah.
Because I think, and there's a funny moment in the credits. I love where he's like, "I ordered my favorite dish, which needs to be lit on fire. Let's see if he does it." And then you can just hear him like, "Here you go."
Yeah.
But yeah, that I think I was used to it in this game, but actually was one of my kind of pet peeves from the original game was the story of Peter and Otto Octavius was so raw and so interesting and so to me so gratifying to be told through this game, especially because they didn't really advertise him. And so I think if you were like a big Spider-Man fan, you'd be like, it's obviously Doc Ock. But like, here comes JJJ, who's like, to me, like a cartoon. You know, it was like, whoa, this guy doesn't seem like he's in the same world.
Yeah.
And I think that might have been the issue, you know, with Krieger. You kind of felt that way as well. You know, just kind of this like a comic book villain, you know, especially when, you know, his relationship with Finn was so intimate and so personal to the two of them. Any expectations you have now for potentially where, you know, we got Peter's gone on vacation, now he's back. There were obviously a lot of things, you know, with characters that they were setting up. Like you said, with all the Spider Cop stuff is actually from the comics. Like that character becomes a vigilante. So it's gonna be interesting to see if she really gets to like completely embrace that role in the sequel. Shout out to Insomniac, man. They're like introducing me to a lot of stuff that Spider-Man games haven't necessarily focused on. You seem like you are just kind of ready for anything that the Spider-Man franchise will throw at you, and you're like they can just do whatever you want. I don't have any necessarily.
Yeah,
any
I don't have
expectations.
huge investment in Spider-Man or stakes like that, so I'm just kind of cool with whatever they want to do. Like Insomniac's a dev I trust. Like obviously they've proven they know what they're doing with Spider-Man, so I'm just whatever they want to do. Cool, go for it.
So we have this big finale. We get to the end of the game. We have Finn, who we haven't really talked a ton about. What did you think, just kind of like of her motivations, how she's brought into the underground? Just kind of her arc.
I get it, like revenge kind of thing like that. Like I think she obviously went over the deep end, but that's kind of like she's supposed to be like that. That's why Miles is supposed to try to get her back. I did like that she kind of like repented at the end a little, but it's just like it's a very classic, you know, just revenge tale. It doesn't need to be overly complex, which I think is fine. You know, her brother died because of it, so it's enough motivation for me to understand.
They really kind of give you a wink and a nudge that I didn't know the story, and when I was playing through it again, he was like, "Hey, you know, it's good to see you again, Finn. Where's your brother?" And Finn's like, "Anyway," and it's like when I played through the second time, it's like, "Oh, he's so clearly dead. Oh my God, come on."
Yeah.
Like, open your eyes, Miles. One thing I thought that they did well, it's a little convenient in terms of video game storytelling, but it makes sense. Krieger kind of reminded me of Sable from the first game, because you have this, villain, a villain I was not, Silver Sable, who I was not familiar with, who comes in, she has her like military crew, and then you defeat her at the end of the game, and or maybe DLC spoilers. I don't know I think you like stop her, but then you actually like get into specifically her stuff in the second DLC, I think. And after you defeat her, and she's like, "Okay, you know, Spider-Man, I'll be on your side now." But she's like, you know, "Good luck telling that to my crew. You know, like we were hired to come into the city to protect people. My soldiers, you know, wink, wink, are still going to be around, and you're still going to have to deal with them." And I think Roxxon was kind of in the same situation where, like, even though Krieger's now in the back of a police car, it's like Roxxon's still out there, and they're still, you know, setting up the context for like if there's still some objectives you haven't done on the map, you know, you're still going to be bumping into Roxxon. And it was also a little convenient with the underground as well, where, and I think that's one of the things that I thought was kind of silly when they first introduced Finn as the Tinkerer, was that she's like, "Come on, underground, let's go." And I'm like, "Wait, you're running these people? Right. Like you're in charge of this group?" And she wasn't. Like I think the underground maybe needed a leader. I think the underground needed its own Krieger, because it was strange that like once after she gets taken out at the end of the story, like the underground's still just kind of
still going, a
bunch of thugs just kind of running around.
Right. They're like they reminded me of the Foot Clan, Jones. Like that's the vibe I got.
They're totally the Foot Clan. Yeah, Foot Clan doesn't need Shredder. They're like putties, you know, from Power Rangers. I love that you brought up the purple v red. It's so perfect for a video game. Like you kind of need that just aesthetically.
Yeah.
I actually remember seeing that in the trailer and being kind of bummed, because I was like, this is going to be neat. We're going to get, you know, this new Miles Morales story. We're going to focus on his character and his, you know, his backstory, his family, you know, his life. And then they showed in the trailer the scene where Rio's speaking, and like the underground shows up, and then Roxxon's like, "Hey," and it was like the trailer was so very like bad guys, other bad guys, Spider-Man in the middle, and I was like, oh, it kind of set itself up being like, and here's the video game plot. And I was like, oh okay. I thought, you know, I thought it would be a little deeper than that, a little more nuanced than that. And it certainly did, in my opinion, just in terms of obviously all the relationships between Miles and these people that he cares about. But the Roxxon underground is just kind of like, purple, red, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Fight. Are you gonna platinum this sucker? Anything?
I mean, this is a really insane time, so probably no. I did do like all the objectives in the city, like I collected everything, but like I don't know if I'm just gonna go because I have to go through the game again, play it through New Game Plus,
right.
And it's like I have a million other things I have to play right now. If I didn't, then yeah.
You were talking about how the phone calls kind of got out of control. What did you think of the app?
The app? Oh, I was like, this is goofy. Like, everyone can just call Spider-Man. That seems really sketchy. But then now at the same time, I was like, oh, it's just like a comic book. It's a video game. Like, whatever, I guess. But, like, this kid built this app, and people just have direct access to Spider-Man. And he gets, like, 10 calls.
I think there's like a
okay.
billion people that live in New York or
Yeah,
something
I was
crazy.
like, okay,
There's
dude.
just some like astronomical number
Yeah.
of people that live in New York City. So yeah,
I thought it was a more like modern way, I guess, that Spider-Man would handle it. I don't know if it's the more realistic way, but I could see where they're going with it.
from a completionist perspective, I liked in the 2018 Spider-Man that you could finish crimes. The crimes weren't like so random that you were just like, I've done this crime before. The game is very much like, oh, we know that's this crime. And so if you see it or hear it, and I definitely appreciated Genki telling me about things over like, we got the cops and Spider-Man, where they're just like, bank robbery, blah, blah, blah. It was nice Genki being like, hey, I know you're busy right now, but they're at this intersection, shooting each other if you want to go stop them. So I did. There was the completionist in me that I liked organizing those things. I like looking at the districts and seeing like, my crimes are done. Cool. If I'm in that area and a crime happens, I can just move on unless I'm really hungry for that one ability token. But I'm curious how the app will evolve in the next game. If they just like ditch that idea, or if Peter's like, hey, that's kind of cool, let's do it.
Yeah.
Do you see them? Can you think of
idea.
other ways that they can make it more realistic or build on it? Or
I don't know how they can make it more realistic right now. Like Peter, he would need someone like Genki, I guess. He didn't really have the one like that in the first game, did he?
No, again, he had his police friend. I don't recall her name.
Like he had multiple people you'd talk to, while Genki kind of did everything here. Yeah, maybe they could do the spider cop stuff again, maybe. But I mean, the app could work. Yeah, Miles could be like, "Hey, Pete, I've been doing this thing too. You should check it out."
I did like that it made the story a little more personal than, again, the crimes and the side missions. There were a lot more side missions in the original Spider-Man game, and the app kind of took the place of some of those, like the bird watching lady. It was just like, hey, go get those birds, or I saw these guys in the park, and it's like, how did you contact me? Did I just like hear you yelling and like come by? Like, so I like that there was like a little bit more context for that. And one thing that I thought was that I appreciated was some of those I would recognize. They did a very specific job of dressing people in a particular way that they repeated later on in the campaign. So at the end, when they were like, okay, let's all help Spider-Man, I'm like, oh, it's Broom Guy. Oh, it's that lady who was stuffed in the back of the car. It was like, so it was neat that they kind of set that up, that like you don't maybe recognize that these people are going to be important. The gal at Feast, who's got her table at the end of the credits, who gives a little fist bump walking by. I was like, I know these people. So I thought that was nice. Maybe something you can only do with Miles, because Peter doesn't really, Peter's much more of a, total Manhattan Spider-Man. His reach is a little bit wider. I don't know if you could necessarily drill into specific characters, but the guy who owns Spider-Man the cat, fun relationships that I don't think we had really dug into in the first game. To wrap it up, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, Brad. Something that I think you and I appreciated. Because, like you mentioned, we got a lot of friggin' games to play. A lot of people are thumbing the games down because they're like, it's glorified DLC. It's a 5-hour game. It is $40 as opposed to $60. You can get the Ultimate Edition when it comes with both games. Which, man, if anybody waited, you're in for a treat. If anybody didn't check it out 2 years ago and was like, all right, time to jump in, like that is a lot of game, a lot of story, to get through. Did the game feel short? Did you wish it was longer? Did it seem weird? Just kind of what Insomniac did?
I don't know, like my perspective from a lot of people maybe who, like, I don't know what the value of each game is to each individual. So I'll just say for me, it felt like it didn't need to be longer to me. They were just telling this one story. I'm actually glad it ended when it did because it felt appropriate. I think if it dragged on even more, then I'm like, okay, you're really just stalling now to keep this going. But there felt like a lot of stuff you could just do on the side if you wanted still too. Like, I didn't beat this game and be like, man, could have gone for 10 more hours of that. Then I would have had a good time. I feel like I was satisfied with this game. But my expectations were set going into this game. I expected this.
I just, it's funny. I wonder when that meeting happened about PlayStation 5, about Miles, know, and I wonder if it happened like before Spider-Man happened. I wonder if literally like, Sony sat down with Insomniac before they even started the first game and they were like, okay, 2 words, PlayStation 5. And they're like, we want, we want to release something. We want to get this game out now, but what can we do on the PlayStation 5 that we can launch with? And they were like, oh, let's put Miles in this game. Let's give him his own side story. Or if they had originally intended to do that, Sony comes at them and they were like, we would love to have some weird, a little Spider-Man Gaiden, like just a little mini Spider-Man.
I think they always wanted to use Miles in some way. I don't know if it was necessarily like going to be focused around PS5, but they definitely planted the seeds of Miles having a more important role in the first game. So I think it was just things lined up probably perfectly, Yeah. I mean, it could be, but I feel like they just made the game they wanted to make the first time. They had okay, we want to do something with Miles down the line. I don't know what we're going to do yet, but we want to do something with him. They finished the DLC, and they're like, oh, well, maybe we can make this for PS5. Because I'm sure they knew a couple years ahead. So they were like, oh, yeah, let's get this out there. Let's do, like, a nice little, like, mini game almost. Like, it's not... I see where people are coming from a glorified expansion. I get it. Especially maybe if you played on PS4, But playing on PS5, I was like... To me, it felt like, not a bad way, Spider-Man 1.5. Like, just a little step up. But I guess maybe some people thought that expansion... I didn't play all the DLCs for the first game, so I don't know. But I wasn't like, oh, man.
I'll admit, I was on the clock when I reviewed this thing.
Right.
And anytime, they had the same moments in the 2018 Spider-Man that they had in this, where it was like, all right, Uncle Aaron, I'll go get those sound samples, which were a little annoying, actually, I got to admit. Some of those, I was like, what the hell? Where is this thing? I'm like, oh, it's the dumb, what was the one? There was one that was bells. It was in Chinatown.
Yeah,
there was one that was like, click, clink, click, clink.
Chimes, yeah.
I was like by the food truck, like, are you making burgers? What is that sound?
Yeah.
But anytime he'd be like, I'm going to go collect all these. And they would do that Manhattan shot where the camera would like zoom over Manhattan and they would all plip, 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 like pop up. And if there were like 6 of them and I was like, oh, thank God. Like, oh no.
Right.
Whenever that shot would start, I would just expect like 40 of them to pop up. And it was like, oh, this is great. This is the very digestible.
It's manageable. Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody who is hungry for as much Spider-Man as you could possibly get, I could see you being, wanting more, being slightly disappointed. But
well, me on the other side, like Assassin's Creed, where I'm just like, dude, these games are way too big and long. So it was nice for me.
But I think, speaking of Assassin's Creed, I think it's interesting having just reviewed, Huber just reviewed Valhalla and I cut the video, and because of when we got the code and how he was able to play it, he had to start playing it at home and then continued playing it in the office because we wanted to get as much as we possibly could done in 4K. And so he actually played that on Xbox One, Xbox One X, and Xbox Series X. And I think the frame rate's the biggest thing that you can like easily see shift.
Sure, yeah.
Even with YouTube compression, just like, whoa, what happened to this new shot? But I think open world games are a really great test of a new gen. It's really easy to stress the frame rate. It's really easy to be put in position. The Miles Morales crashed way more on my second playthrough than it did on my first playthrough.
Sure,
they did something to that firmware or that game to make. Ian was playing last night in the right middle of a cutscene. Just It's like nothing was happening.
brutal.
It's like he and Finn were in the diner, and the game's like, I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, it's just like too intense. Yeah.
But I think a Cerny, in one of those first conversations we have for the PS5, and he was like, take New York, for example. No specific reason. Look how fast New York runs on the PS5. So I wonder if, I love your position on this game. I love your, I don't want to call it indifference, but I love your kind of mild, lukewarm approach, just generally to the story and Spider-Man in general.
Right.
Because I can't stop thinking what a burden this was for Insomniac, because they have, a launch game. They have this kind of pseudo middle of the road sequel ish 1.5. You said to the original Spider-Man, to tell a brand new Miles Morales story on top of Spider-Verse, which is like, people adore that game.
Right.
So they're like, how can we do something that celebrates that but is different from that? And I think one of the, again, not to spoil anything from the movie, but I think one of the biggest things is Spider-Verse is focused on Miles. Like, that is his story, and obviously the other, Spider-Gwen and these other versions of Spider-Man. And where this was very much, I feel, Harlem. This was definitely focused on his corner of the city, and that was something that Spider-Verse didn't do. And so I just think of Insomniac being like, okay, yeah, no pressure, launch game, all of these things that we have to do. And so, considering all of the things that could have potentially gone wrong, and how much time they had, in the last couple of years to put this thing together, I was pretty impressed, I thought, overall.
Oh, dude. Yeah, I'm super impressed with them. I think they're fantastic devs. I think they did a great job at like how you said, just differentiating it from the movie.
Yeah.
Like, for me, yeah, I don't have those connections, but as someone like you, where you're finding little things that help separate, I think that's great.
And I am surprised that the very first glimpse we ever saw of Spider-Man Miles Morales was the ending, where he hits the thing and his suit just rips off and tears off of his face.
I know. Yeah, I was thinking that too. I was like, oh, you gonna show this? All right.
That is a climactic moment. It's really if you the trailer for Fifth Element. I actually think it was in the trailer for Fifth Element. Her the end of the story. But it still didn't. I didn't think about that until I was actually playing the game, and he went to go do it. I was like, oh, it's gonna be that moment, and then it happened. I was like, it's literally that shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's neat to see. It's actually they flip the order in Spider-Verse, because in Spider-Verse they focus a lot more on him being invisible. That's like a power that he picks up, and it's like, whoa, how'd I do that? And he really struggles trying to be able to do that manually. Whereas in this, he gets the Venom powers, which I don't know if they call him that in the comics. I didn't think about that being confusing, that there's a Spider-Man villain called
named
Venom. But anyway, I wonder if that'll be a fun moment. Like, you called it what?
Yeah. What?
But jolly, sir. This I wonder how. So we got Spider-Man, and then 2 years later we get this game. So does that mean 2 years later we're gonna get the sequel?
2 or
4
3
years for a full game? Yeah,
2 or 3 probably. I'd say 3.
2022. Oh, okay.
Insomniac,
Maybe.
pretty fast. Yeah.
Maybe
I mean, they
next
did
year.
the DLCs too for the first game, then this. So
That poor Insomniac dev who's just not a big Spider-Man fan.
it's just like, man.
That poor guy.
Yeah, he just wants to make something else.
Doesn't like the East Coast, doesn't like comic books, and Ted Price is like, I got news for you, buddy. This is you got straighten up
It's
or
like,
fly
oh,
right,
put
man.
me on Ratchet.
Yeah, exactly. You are stuck.
Yeah.
In this universe for the foreseeable future. And it's neat that even after Otto and them doing their own version of the Sinister Six, which actually brings us to one thing we can talk about before we leave, was were you bummed Rhino came back, or did that kind of seem like recycling a little bit? Or
And I mean, I think they needed a kind of a something from their first game, like a villain you can kind of recognize, because otherwise there isn't really anything.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's goofy and convenient, but oh, it's Rhino, You spent all this time making it, you might as well use him again.
I like one line I like from the Rhino Finn fight is she says something basically let's just kill him and get over it, and Miles is like, no, we're not gonna kill him, that's not what we do, and Rhino says, and that's why you will lose.
Yeah. Yeah, Rhino's awesome, dude.
Takes the sword to the neck. I wonder if you can shake that off. I
know.
guess. But it's neat that even the Vulture fight was cool. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, that was
fun.
cool.
I wonder if we'll get any flashbacks. It'd be fun to to see like a young Peter. It's like, I know we didn't get the origin, and it was refreshing that we didn't, but I kind of want to go back.
I could see that, Jones. Yeah.
Especially when they introduce Harry, like we finally get
Yeah.
to see Harry and have him in cutscenes. So it'd be interesting to see if we like kind of go back to early MJ Harry days back at school.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
I thought it was
The Uncle Ben flashback again. Yeah.
I thought it was a little silly that he like left him all of these trials, and the final one was just in like the square of the school
In the middle of
Can you imagine?
school?
You're like,
Yeah.
I gotta go back. I gotta, I'm taking winter classes, or like I gotta go meet with that teacher, and you're like walking through
Yeah.
the quad, and you're like, what the hell is?
Yeah. What's all this stuff?
What's this spider laptop doing here? All this projection technology.
Yeah.
Somebody actually hacks it and is like, the vulture comes
Yeah.
flying out, knocks him unconscious.
Yeah.
But there are still, just like you were saying with Venom, I like that we've had 1.5 games now, and we still have so many
So
villains
much you can do
that
still.
they could
Yeah.
potentially do. We
They got a lot
never
they
got
can
into
do.
any of the goblin stuff. We didn't do a definite tease of the glider. Loved speaking of flashbacks, loved the cameo, the little Peter cameo. Oh, excuse me.
I did love that. Yeah, the
When he bumps
museum.
in. And what I didn't do, because again, I was hustling. I was like, "Oh, Peter, cool." Anyway, because I could tell it was the last mission, and it was like 3 a.m. I'm like, "I gotta get out of here." But this on the second playthrough, I just kind of hung around, and you can Peter and Otto talk for a little bit. They're like, "Oh, this technology's cool," and I love when they get an actor back just for
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that was a nice touch.
I can imagine that being a confusing phone call when they called Otto Octavius's voice actor, and he's like, "What? Really? I'm in the next." They're like, "No, it's a flashback." He's like, "Oh, okay."
Okay.
I was like, I got excited for a second. I got to fight him again. Cool. Maybe we'll bring him back. But yeah, you think to cap things off, you think we're set up well for Spider-Man 2?
Oh, yeah. They can go so many directions, I feel like, Jones. I have no idea what they're going to do. Besides, like, Harry and Osborn's maybe.
Right.
But there's so much.
And just obviously just the whole Spider-Man 2 being, the two Spider-Man, and just come out.
It's just like,
That marketing writes itself.
I'm wondering, though, Jones, like, with that Avengers Tower, like, are you going to have someone show up? Someone else? Your own version of them? Even just for a brief moment. Mm-hmm. Like, is Tony going to be there or something? I don't know.
What do you think? You think that'll distract? Do you think the story
I
can
don't know.
handle that?
Like, I think it could handle it. I think I trusted Insomniac doing that pretty much now with any Marvel thing. I don't think it would ruin it at all. It just depends if they want to do anything with it, if they want to do Avengers. I mean, if Square doesn't do it, or maybe Marvel will just do or Insomniac will do their own version of the Avengers. I don't know if it'll be Avengers, but I wouldn't be surprised if a character popped in.
Yeah, it's not going to be Square because they, Spider-Man's coming to the PlayStation version
Right.
of Avengers, and they
Right.
Square made a clear line, which I think is dumb. I think that maybe they should have had some synergy there,
Yeah.
especially with Avengers having the issues that they're having. They're like, no, we got our own Spider-Man. It's like, are you sure? I think you need this Spider-Man. I think you need Insomniac to come in and help you a little bit with some brand awareness. I think I would dig it if it was like an app situation where if like they wanted to bring in the Avengers or even Doctor Strange or like other characters, or Fantastic Four, who Spider-Man does a lot of stuff with. There's a Fantastic Four costume in the original game. It'd be neat if like that was its own like storyline that you could follow and track, where you like I know anytime I load up this chain, it's all bonus stuff. It's all stuff.
Yeah, like a quest line, like a Doctor Strange quest line or something.
Yeah, running errands for the Avengers. We'll see. Well, thank you, Brad. I appreciate you being in the comfort of your own home with your very own PlayStation 5, taking the time to play the only game that you had. It's a sacrifice, Brad.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
It was tough.
That.
I know.
And thank you, everybody, for checking the video out. And thank you, of course, if you are watching the spoiler mode. That means you are at least a $1 patron of Easy Allies. So, of course, we appreciate that financial support. And tempted to do that New Game Plus playthrough because it's a Christmas game. We're not even in December yet, and so it might when it gets a little chillier here. It doesn't get very chilly in Southern California, but if we get some chilly days over the holidays, it'll be nice to go back and revisit this campaign. Thank you, patrons. Thank you very much, Brad. Thank you, Spider-Man.
Thanks, Spider-Man.
Oh, duty calls. Hey, really great to meet you both. Future's looking bright. Hello.
Review copy provided by PlayStation.